Hello, everyone. Uh, Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience also. Today, I want to start thinking about, well, we're going to be thinking about the placenta in many different ways with people that I admire profoundly and deeply. And I want to invite you to think about the relationships that we establish with others with this presentation. And I would like to start with a science fiction idea. So let's imagine, as we were very afraid with COVID, that the DNA of a virus could come into your body and transform you into another species. So this is the science fiction story I would like to think about. How would it happen if this DNA would come in and transform you? Well, this has already happened to you. This cannot happen with a coronavirus, but this can happen with retroviruses. And so these viruses gave us a fusogenic protein that clumps cells together into a temporary organ, a transient organ. So what I'm going to speak about today is the possibility of viral species, trans-species, culture and health coming together. So this is the protein that comes from a virus, syncytin. And this viral protein is now integrated into our DNA and allowed us to become from being alien animals into live birth-giving animals. So this is how the protein looks. And for proteins, the structure is really important. It's not only the chemical elements that compose it, but the way that the structure is folded also determines the capacity of the protein to work. So it's really important to know exactly the sculptural, the physical properties of this protein. So this is other ways, and I'm really interested in the different ways that we're trying to determine and to represent how proteins look like. So one way that we have to know how these tiny, mini proteins look like, because we cannot look at them in microscope, which is the way that we usually do to look into very small things, is to make crystals out of this protein. Chemists have told me that it's very hard, it's almost magical to be able to make crystals out of the proteins. But once you have them, you can make an X-ray of them. And if you make an X-ray of these proteins, what you get is these diffraction patterns. So they have been able, from these diffraction patterns, to calculate the 3D structure of proteins. So these sculptural qualities of the protein that allow the protein to be recognized and function exactly where it needs to function. So this is how, with these calculations, you need to go through a series of mathematical processes in order to determine the shape. And as I was saying, the shape in proteins is really important. So all of these calculations I found delightful. I think this is beautiful, a beautiful way to think about proteins, a beautiful thing about the DNA of a virus that came into our DNA, but they are really abstract. So when I'm thinking about the placenta, I want to talk about something that is very fleshy, that is very material. And placentas have also cultural histories of being used as food, as tinctures, also as ritual objects buried outside our houses. But now in modern medicine, and has happened, for instance, to the placenta that I was connected to, they are considered a biohazard. And after you're giving birth, they are thrown away immediately. Whereas in reality, they are a fundamental, a very valuable source of stem cells that could serve our lives. So there's so much to this organ that is the only transient organ because we only have it for a few months and then we throw it away. The rest of our organs we generally keep. But then I'm very interested in the question of who owns the placenta, and here we're starting to think more about biopolitics. Who owns this organ? Why, if we want to, we cannot keep this organ because it apparently doesn't belong to us, but it has to be thrown away and destroyed as a biohazard right away. And my colleague Cynthia, they're going to speak way more about the politics of the placenta and all the political dimensions of childbearing and the ownership of our bodies. But what I want to talk about with this project will be in installation is talk about these stories of childbirth. We all have a story. We will all had a placenta. We all have a scar in our bellies of the connection that we had to this placenta. So these stories and histories of the placenta through the medical histories here on anatomical waxes, but to our all personal stories of what our moms did with our placentas. I'm interested in collecting and re-narrating so we can all think about them more and not just throw them away in a second after being nourished and nurtured by them for so long. because these placentas, as I was saying, come from a virus. And it's interesting because we think of viruses as parasites, but this viral protein also allows us to parasite from the mother. And this is not a term that I'm coming up with, but the research papers about the placenta syncytin talk about parasitation in this process. So I want to think about nourishment and parasitism, but not only practically and biologically, but we also nourish and have parasitic relationships with other symbolic mothers. And these are very important theories and professors, and people have been really important in my life, nourishing us and providing for us. Also, the placenta is fascinating in terms of under-researched women diseases. So there's a lot of research diseases that we have not studied as preeclampsia, like the high blood pressure during pregnancy, gestational diabetes. They're all connected to the placenta. And all of these under-researched women diseases, for example, are researched by Dr. Bobadilla Lugo, who is also the person I was attached to with a placenta. So, in short, I really realized how the stories of our research, because I work with microorganisms, I went into virus, and then I went into connecting with the placenta, and then I realized I was connecting to my mother's research in the end again. So we are going on circles. So to finalize this presentation, the installation that I'm working with, and I hope to present this year in Mexico, is about these feminist stories, about owning our own bodies, our transient organs, proteins, shapes, connection with virus, and our connection, very deep interconnection with other species that is ingrained into who we are, and this has transformed who we have become. So, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. He went to sleep. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Maro. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank Isaiah for inviting us to speak, and also I'd like to thank all of you for coming to our panel. My name is Cristin Millett. I'm an embedded faculty researcher in the Arts and Design Research Incubator and a professor in the School of Visual Arts at Penn State University. And today I'll discuss some of my thoughts on the future of human reproduction and share some of my artwork on the subject. So I am an artist. I make sculptural objects and installations, architectural environments that you walk through. I am interested in the power relationship that is architecturally defined depending on one's location within the spaces that I create. Whether you are the physician, the medical student, or the cadaver. When you reach the center of this installation and you stand at the foot of the exam table, you can watch an abdominal hysterectomy being performed, only to realize that it's your own face projected onto the female body. For almost 30 years, I've researched anatomy through the lens of medical history. I have studied anatomical texts, medical instruments, anatomical models, and anatomy theaters across Europe and the United States. In 2015 and again in 2016, I was a resident artist at the Digital Stone Project in Gramolazzo, Italy, where I carved marble with this amazing 7-axis robot. During my first residency at the DSP, I created transection of the anatomical planes, a marble dissection table incised along the 3 anatomical planes, the coronal, the sagittal, and the transverse. This piece is part of another installation, Coronal Plane. Coronal Plane references the oldest surviving anatomy theater in the world at the University of Padua. This installation is approximately 30 feet by 30 feet, or about 9 meters square, and is constructed of CNC milled wood, LED lights, and inkjet prints mounted on glass. In the Paduan Anatomy Theater, Venetian boat builders hand-carved the wooden balustrades seen in the image on the left. For my installation, I CNC milled wood panels that reference the same motif from Padua. At the heart of the installation is the dissection table, transection of the anatomical planes. The exterior of the installation references Catholic confessionals and confronts the moral debate regarding the practice of dissection at the time that the original anatomy theater was built. This installation laid the groundwork for a new direction in my work, where I'm asking questions about the rapid scientific advancements in the field of human reproduction. What is the future of human reproduction? The capacity to conceive offspring is a basic human biological function, but how we go about reproduction is rapidly changing. We are poised to completely control and even willfully design our entire reproductive process. This evolution is driven by recent scientific advances. It began with the advent of easily accessible contraception, and further changed with the development of in vitro fertilization. Pre-implantation genetic diagnosis means that prospective parents have foreknowledge and some oversight over their propagation. Recent breakthroughs may grant parents the option to program specific genetic expressions and even predetermined traits in their offspring. In fact, in 2018, twins born in China were genetically modified before birth using CRISPR technology in the hope of rendering them immune to HIV. And just last year, 2 groups published in Cell and Nature that they have grown synthetic mouse embryos for 8.5 days, the equivalent of 17 weeks human gestation. However, these mouse embryos were not generated from a sperm and an egg. Instead, these embryos were grown from combining 3 types of stem cells: embryonic, placental, and yolk sac cells. What is also significant is that the synthetic mouse embryo was housed in a mechanical uterus, an incubator that provides ventilation as it rotates. Only the entire 9-month incubation in the uterus has yet to be supplanted by technology. Breaching this final barrier means we embark on an unprecedented path: the dehumanization of the human reproductive process. In 2017, 2 different research groups working independently, one, a team of researchers from the University of Western Australia and Tohoku University Hospital in Japan, and the second, a group of researchers at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, successfully extended the gestation of premature lambs in an entirely man-made extracorporeal system. Lambs were removed via C-section at the equivalent of 23 weeks human gestation and placed in the external uterine environment to continue development. In a typical healthy 9-month, 40-week pregnancy, gestation is divided into trimesters, as you see in this timeline. To better understand the profound nature of the groundbreaking developments in reproductive science, consider this. In today's world, in vitro fertilization is fairly commonplace. The introduction of mechanical gestation for the mouse embryo extends its development to the equivalent of 17 weeks human gestation. while on the other end of the reproductive timeline, we can now provide a mechanical uterus for extremely premature infants at the equivalent of 23 weeks. The span between these two reproductive interventions is just shy of 6 weeks. When these two bookends meet in the middle, ectogenesis will become a reality. And once pregnancy takes place in an artificial environment and becomes as commonplace as in vitro fertilization, the placenta and the womb as maternal incubator will become obsolete. The implications of this radical innovation, or these radical innovations, raise a host of ethical, legal, and biological questions. In 2020, I received a Fulbright Senior Scholar Award to the University of Western Australia, where I was a resident at Symbiotic with Ionat. And I worked with a number of scientists whose research and discoveries are changing the future of human reproduction. Thanks to these individuals, I'm thinking a lot about the placenta. This is a wet specimen, a preserved human's placenta at the School of Human Sciences at UWA. The placenta has unique biological traits, as Maro talked a lot about, and is of scientific importance and cultural significance in human reproduction. It is also an understudied and invaluable biological resource. For my Fulbright, I explored the science of ectogenesis and its potential impact on the placenta. Unfortunately, the pandemic prompted my premature departure from Symbiotic, and I was forced to return to the United States, where the plague was rampant. Luckily, I have been fortunate to continue the project through a fantastic collaboration with Cynthia White and the other members of my panel. Cynthia White is an award-winning filmmaker and multimedia artist. About a year ago, we connected with a local midwife who generously helped us acquire human placentas for our project, giving us an incredible opportunity to observe and study multiple placental specimens. This process included creating prints, photographs, and fixation to preserve the specimen. To fix the specimen, we injected it with formalin, and then the specimen sat in a formalin bath for several weeks until the fixation process was complete. For our project, we are studying and visualizing the placenta in a myriad of ways. In early February, we took our first high-resolution 3D MRI of a fixed specimen. The goal of these MRI scans is to acquire data sets that can be translated into a three-dimensional computer model. From these scans, we've learned that in order to better capture the vascular network, we need to remove more blood clots through perfusion. So our next step is to perfuse the placenta. The placenta is an organ designed to circulate blood, carrying oxygen and nutrients between the maternal and fetal bodies. A successful placental perfusion will flush out the blood, leaving the organ transparent, as you see here. Ultimately, we hope to achieve this same translucency using a process called decellularization. It's a big word. So in the decellularization process, the original organ is stripped of its cells, leaving an extracellular matrix like a scaffold to support new growth through reseeding. A lot of current research in tissue engineering is focusing on the placenta because it provides an abundant resource of extracellular matrices, making the tissue ideal for regenerative medicine and experimentation with stem cells. These images show native and decellularized placenta tissue. The outcome of our research will be an immersive installation comprised of multiple elements, including visual documentation of the scientific and artistic process, as well as media and experimental films. The central component will be a sculpture of an artificial uterus created out of a polyethylene biobag filled with an amniotic-like fluid of nutrient-rich media. The transparent incubator will allow viewers to peer into the interior of the womb, revealing a simulacrum of a placenta seeded with living, growing cells. Our project, titled Ex Utero, will ask questions and prompt conversations about the socio-cultural impact of ectogenesis, a science with far-reaching implications that will change the future of humanity. Thank you. Here's this. Okay. Green to go forward, green to play. It's okay.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you, ICEA, for organizing such an amazing conference and inviting us to come. I'm just waiting for my notes to open here. There we go. Okay. So my name is Cynthia White. I'm a research associate at Penn State University, and I work in the Arts and Design Research Incubator. There, I'm also a filmmaker, and I work at the intersection of art and science, using time-based media to reframe scientific narratives and elevate arts-based research through cinematic storytelling. Inherent in this work are collaborations and engagements with people and material of all kind. Oh, I see what I'm doing. Sorry, there's that one. Now we're at this one. There we go. Over the years, I've had amazing opportunities to work alongside brilliant researchers and artists at centers like the Penn State Microbiome Center and Symbiotic as well, where I co-directed a film with Kathy High. And I teach classes in digital media and social practice. I'm also a political activist and a believer in community-based action. So, as Maro mentioned, every human began life with a placenta. No matter what sex, we all have had a placenta at birth. And throughout time, the placenta has been celebrated by cultures in many different ways, but commonly it is associated with the health and spiritual well-being of the child. In this palette, dating back to 3400 BCE, we see the first, or the earliest known depiction of the human placenta. On the image, a pharaoh walks in procession behind a figure carrying a staff with a placenta with its umbilical cord. This is an anatomical illustration of a human placental dissection. During the anatomical renaissance of the 16th, During the anatomical Renaissance of the 16th century, the practice of instructional dissection became the preferred method of studying human anatomy, moving from speculation about the human body to direct observation and dissection. By the beginning of the 18th century, medical instrumentation like the forceps were introduced to childbirthing. These were legally classified as surgical devices, which conveniently made it illegal for women and midwives to practice childbirth practices, because women were not allowed to practice medicine or practice or study medicine at the time. This was the beginning of the medicalization of childbirth. In more current scientific research, artificial intelligence is being used to better understand placental pathologies. In recent published literature, researchers from Penn State and Northwestern Memorial Hospital analyzed 13,000 placentas to create a novel AI-based methodology and software to help predict placental pathologies. So I just Before I go on, I wanted to just preface my talk by saying that my research and my work is based in the United States. So the legal and medical material that I'll reference is in this geopolitical context. In the US, the vast majority of hospital births are attended by physicians, while births by midwives are less common and typically happen outside of the hospital setting. So once a placenta is outside of the body, it becomes a very complicated object of desire. Medical classifications and legal incongruencies around placental ownership have created a convoluted landscape for understanding how and what the placenta can be used for. I will explore some of these questionable practices and intrinsic contradictions. So what happens to the placenta postpartum? Current applications include personal use. So when a family is successful in repossessing their placenta, they can bury it, they can consume it, they can create memorial art like jewelry or prints like you saw, or they can choose to bank their placenta with a cord banking company. Private cord blood banking is regarded as a type of healthcare insurance policy for your child. Possible applications might include using the stem cells from the cord blood to cure a potential genetic disease through autologous stem cell therapy in the future. Third-party uses. If the placenta is not incinerated as biological waste at the hospital, it can be used for medical research, including scientific research to advance treatment for some types of blood disorders like leukemia, or as tissue repair in ocular surgeries and skin wounds, specifically to burn victims. The placenta can also be used by private for-profit biotech companies who sell biological material from the placenta and its tissues for a very lucrative profit, marketing it in cosmetics and other elective therapies. So who owns the placenta postpartum? A patchwork of formal and informal laws and regulations control whether individuals can repossess their placentas and under what conditions. There are a few states that have reclassified the placenta in order to make it more accessible to birthers and their families. Hawaii, for example, was one of the very first states to change the law based on cultural indigenous practices of the native Pacific Islanders. However, in the medicalized hospital context, as Maro explained, the placenta is generally considered medical waste under federal and state law. The term waste is very problematic, especially for the birther, as it furthers historical social perceptions about female hygiene and birth as being dirty and culturally taboo. It also stigmatizes families who choose to retain their placentas for cultural, spiritual, and health reasons. By using the term waste, however, a woman and their family are also much more likely to relinquish the placenta on the grounds that it is contaminated material. However, on closer examination of this exchange, women are actually donating their placenta in a gift economy. But once the placenta leaves the delivery room, it becomes a marketable commodity. In a typical American hospital, it is expected that you sign a consent form when you arrive at the hospital in labor in order to receive medical care for your childbirth. This is an example of a standard blanket consent form stating that tissue and body parts removed during your time at the hospital belong to the facility. So these companies are just a few of the many in the United States, and they have become known as the birth tissue profiteers. Since the 1990s, there has been a growing industry around unregulated therapies proclaiming the medical benefits of legitimate stem cell therapy. These treatments are modern-day elixirs and are packaged and promoted to target vulnerable populations and advertised as curing everything from chronic pain to cancer, Alzheimer's to arthritis, and most recently, COVID. Most all of these companies are selling products that have not gone through proper clinical trials and until very recently, unregulated by the US Food and Drug Administration. This new frontier is made possible in large part by unlimited access to placentas from hospitals. Because of the legal and medical language used for defining birth tissue, as well as the language used to market these products, many of these companies fly under the radar. It is predicted by the year 2030 that the stem cell therapy market will reach a US $4.4 billion worldwide. So the most highly sought after placentas, the ones that are most valuable, are obtained from C-section procedures in which the placenta's amniotic fluids are more easily harvested and the placenta is not contaminated by the vaginal microbial communities found in the birth canal. Currently, in the United States, 1/3 of all births are by cesarean section, making cesarean surgery the most common operating room procedure in the United States. So in this obstetrical landscape, reclaiming your placenta is not legally easy or straightforward, and is actually more difficult for people of color or those who cannot afford to shop for better obstetric care. This is a large segment of our population that is already at higher risk of coercive medical intervention and has a much higher rate of maternal morbidity. We have witnessed a systematic state-by-state whittling of reproductive rights since the 1970s, when abortion became legalized by the federal government. And then on June 24th, 2022, the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, ending 50 years of federal protection of women's rights to seek a safe abortion and receive universal reproductive health care. This ruling will forever impact our independence as women in this country. With this political backdrop and the collaborative research about ectogenesis that Cristin and I have embarked on, we felt compelled to make a cinematic statement when this happened. This film takes place in a futuristic time when human reproduction has radically changed and reproductive freedoms are even more restricted. Birth tissue is a highly prized commodity, making the placenta a heavily trafficked organ. Welcome to the Placenta Underground, where women take sanctuary to learn DIY obstetrical care and join to honor the placenta. Thank you.
I hate this thing. Last time I had lots of problem with that. Here we are. I'm going to be really short because you already heard from me enough, I think, and I want to leave some room for questions. And thank you, Cristin, for inviting me for this wonderful panel. And I will just continue the theme by talking about DNA chauvinism. Oh, excellent, it's worked. So also in responding to the beautiful women here in the panel, I'm going to talk from the micro, from the level of the DNA in this case, not going as far as the protein if you want, but to the level of the whole body and not necessarily the human body. The current hot field in biotechnology is what's called synthetic biology. And synthetic biology is putting the engineering mindset into life, into the messiness of life, as we saw through the placenta, and trying to make some order in that mess. And it goes either by taking life and engineering it into its small component, or, bottom up, trying to create life from scratch. And a prominent example of that approach is by Craig Venter, and many of you probably heard about Cynthia. And Cynthia is here, but Cynthia is with an S. And if I move here, is that the one that I'm talking? Okay, we'll leave it here. So Cynthia basically is the idea of how, and Craig Venter said, I managed to create the first organism from scratch in which the father, or one of the parents, I say the father, is a computer. And what he did technically is basically taking a bacteria, it's called Mycoplasma genitalium. It's a parasitic bacteria that reside, of course, in the male genitalia of humans and other primates. And it was chosen by Venter because it has the shortest DNA sequence. And what he did is basically took the DNA out of that bacteria and then sequenced it using a computer and created the sequence and then put it back into the bacteria. And said, here, for the first time in humanity, I created a new artificial life forms. And here we are. And he said, when there is a mystery, I can't read from there, there is an opportunity for vitalism and religion to thrive. Oh my gosh. However, when my team successfully booted the synthetic DNA software within the cell, it is a software now. We demonstrated that our basic understanding of the machinery of cellular life had advanced to a significant point. In answer to Schrödinger's little question, what is life? We had been able to provide one compelling answer. DNA is the software and basis of life. Venter is taking a masculinist position on the creation of life, emphasizing what the male provides in the act of procreation, which is a tiny packet of DNA in the sperm, downplaying or even ignoring the female contribution of the egg with the cellular machinery and other non-DNA-based hereditary mechanism, as well as the womb hosted with that female body. Sorry, as you can see. Let me go back. Now, this is the image that was chosen by Venter's laboratory to kind of market Cynthia with the S from synthetic. And I would like to ask what that image reminds you of. Oh, well, I told you because you're thinking eyes, obviously, yes? Blue eyes gazing back at you. Well, we thought as well, but there was another thesis that says that they also look like a part of the female anatomy that I will not mention here. These images stand in direct contradiction to Venter's materialist, anti-vitalist, anti-metaphysical view of life. Instead of a fetishistic idea of the abstract vessel, the bacteria, holding the new life, the artificial DNA, Cynthia with an S is becoming feminized monstrosity, a racialized entity with agency that locks its gaze on ours. Venter's DNA chauvinist, paternalistic, and anthropocentric view can be seen as a return to chauvinist idea of life originating from the animalculus that reside in a sperm. Cynthia, by being partly synthetically engineered, is allocated a name with a sexual connotation. It carries blue eyes, and it's belonged to and patented by a business corporation. Now, so Cynthia becoming a female, but I don't know how you know that bacteria has no sex, yeah? So it is quite interesting, this anthropocentric paternalistic approach. So as humans engineer living system, life are isolated and reduced to the component parts in an essence, privileging over information over context. We call it DNA chauvinism, and we talked about it before. I talked about it before in my keynote. And as I talked about in my keynote, I'm concentrating on the milieu rather than the life itself, and I would like to concentrate more on the incubator as the unsung hero of biotechnology. And I think I talked about that, so I'll go quickly. And I promised in my keynote that I will go further into the human incubator, because I talked a lot about chicken incubators before. And this is the first, this is the beginning of human incubator. And as you can see here, this is done in not a medical context as we see today, and it's quite interesting in terms of our panel that originally actually giving birth was a non-medicalized process. This is done in the early 20th century in art fair and in even freak shows, as you can see here. This is the Coney Island in New York. And you can see here, baby incubator for sales to hospitals and amusement parks, which is an interesting combination. An expensive device, it was designed to be used for either by wealthy private patrons or by the poor, who, in lieu of payment, allow the babies to publicly exhibited. Its design is ideal for exhibition purposes, with the large glass windows placed at eye level and the tiny infant's bed suspended in the center. It is precisely this design specification, relevant not to the healthcare, but to the healthcare funding, which shaped the path of the Lion incubator. The way this incubator were promoted in Europe and the USA was through public fairs in which enthusiastic public had to pay for admission to watch the show of the infant incubator with living infants. And Proctor, who talked about the human incubator, said, and this is quite relevant to what's happening today with the European relation, no London hospitals were willing to entrust premature babies to the show. So Connie, the creator of those incubators, was forced to return to Paris and retrieve 3 wash baskets full of premature foundlings for the shows in the UK and America. Now, it ran in the Coney Island from 1903 till 1943 and was instrumental in Cornell University New York Hospital opening you see, I'm not in my element today, but it took 40 years to move those kind of incubators from the realm of the entertainment and the freak show into the realm of the medical context, which you talked about. And it's quite interesting in retrospect to see that this kind of technology enabled to save the life of 8,000 preemies. And there are many evidences of those babies then growing up into mature people and completely healthy and normal life. But I don't want to be completely human-centric. Oh, and this is the work that we created with the incubators. Have you been, okay, I'll go quickly. We use compost to grow meat, which I talked in my keynote. But I'll just, I feel, we are very much talking about placenta in terms of the human. All mammals have placenta beside the 2 weird animals in Australia, the platypus and echidna, who also have an egg. But an egg is also an interesting kind of incubator, if you want. And I would like to talk about the maliflower. I have a beautiful video, but I don't have the time to talk about it. If you think that the compost incubator, the incubator that was made of compost, is a human invention, let me tell you that we always copy others. And in this case, we copy the maliflower birds, and they're native to Australia. They inhabit the part of Western Australia, the south of Western Australia, and they're notable for the large nesting mounds they constructed by the males and the lack of parental care after the chick is hatched. Males build the nest mounds for eggs incubation, and female lay eggs depending on the temperature and rainfall. So they are actually very much depends on the context of the environment. So we are looking here in even a larger incubator. Each egg weighs about 10% of the female body weight, and over a season she commonly lays 250% of her own weight. Respect. Hatchling use their strong feet to break out of the egg. They then lay on their backs and scratch their way to the surface. Chicks pop out of the nesting material with little or no warning, with eyes and beaks tightly closed, then immediately take a deep breath and open their eyes before freezing motionless for as long as 20 minutes. The chick then quickly emerges from the hole and rolls or staggers to the base of the mound, disappearing into the scrub within moments. Within an hour, it will be able to run reasonably well. It can flutter for a short distance and run very fast within 2 hours. And despite not having yet grown tail feathers, it can fly strongly within a day. Chicks have no contact with their adults or other chicks. Isn't that a dream of every feminist? Okay, and I'll just finish. Oh, and you look at that. This is how they do it. That's their engineering, this is the movie that you won't see. And I'll finish by what is the current incubator of today? How boring. We have here a square, beige, invisible, almost neutral. And as you can read, the aesthetic of invisibility may serve to make the cells and tissues devoid of agency, extracted and abstracted from the body in which they were derived, as well as from body they have become. In addition, it renders technology invisible and therefore neutral or even natural, like Mother Earth, without any footprint on the environment, an autotrophic artificial mother. hope I left some time for questions, so please.
Do we have a little bit of time for questions?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
That was an amazing panel. Wait, the microphone, please. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, but not
think you said
our friends. So you have a microphone here. And you have a few minutes here.
Thank you. So I was wondering if any of you have looked at the trend of placentophagy in among celebrities lately, because we see all of these companies trying to make profit out of it. But there's also like an underground movement in community birthing and some communities of eating placenta. Have you looked into this?
Beyond celebrities, I think this has been in many cultures traditionally. So this is something that has been done traditionally for a long time, and maybe now, like, it's being picked up somewhere else. But this has been part of cultures for a long time. Tacos of placenta. Yeah.
I just wonder if there will be a point when we'll start to grow placentas, rather without again the need for a mother.
That was fabulous. Thank you so much, all of you. I'll try and compress this question to something simple. With the things you were talking about, Cynthia, the biopolitics, the legal situation, I had two questions about that. In Australia, I know what you talked about was a US context. In Australia, tissues removed from the body no one owns them, like nobody's allowed to own them unless a pathology company intervenes and studies them, and then that can confer intellectual property rights onto the tissue. So I'm guessing it's in the US that the ownership legals would be the same, but the policies in Australia, Department of Health and the Royal College of Pathologists support patients to keep their tissues unless there's a public health risk or some reason why it shouldn't happen. So that I was curious whether the policies are similar in the US or whether they vary state by state in terms of supporting patients. The problem in Australia is usually the surgeons are not aware of it in terms of surgical waste, so they usually forbid it anyway. And the other question was when you were showing the consent form for women coming into the hospitals, and it says, I consent to give my tissue to the hospital, blah, blah, blah. When it's commercialised and the tissues go to corporate entities, are there explicit, I was amazed that, are there explicit consent forms about these are the various pathways your tissue might end up on, or is that all obscured in this vague, like really simple sentence? Because I was like really stunned and shocked that could happen, that there's a precedent for consent forms to explicitly say what's going to happen to the tissue, but for it all to be hidden in a fog like that and then commercialised is incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. It's shocking. I uncovered a rat's nest of information and a lot of dead ends when I was reading about this, and there's actually not a lot of information and data about how placentas circulate the commercial realm once they leave the hands of, or they leave the hospital, the birthing room. So there's also a movement. There are procurement organizations that will come into the hospital and they'll approach women who are either about to give birth or are in the near weeks of giving birth, and they will specifically ask the woman to donate their placenta to them, and then they sell it to other companies. But it also will get sold by the hospital or donated by the hospital. So it's really it's a gray area that is desperate for, I think, more regulation. And to your first question, it's actually quite similar. There are a handful of states now that have reclassified the tissue in order to make it easier for families to repossess the placenta, but it does always have to go through pathology before it gets given back to you. But when we speak about like midwifery circles outside of the hospital, there's no regulation, and women can do whatever they want to, and families can do whatever they want to. Yeah.
And the last question for Miss. Yeah.
Thank you. I love this. I'm curious from your perspective, what are artists' responsibilities or opportunities to express solidarity in the realm of reproductive freedom, perhaps with queer people? Or what conflicts or concerns have you witnessed within communities of feminists thinking about the placenta and future of human reproduction?
That's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of the conversations that I have in relationship specifically to ectogenesis is the potential for anyone to be the mother, and the possibility for people, regardless of their sex assigned at birth, to have sperm or have egg, and then have an offspring from that. Do you want to chime in?
I just think it's a very complex situation because the promise of being able to carry a baby and give birth outside of a body can be also seductive for those who cannot, or you can even use the discourse of it will give maybe equal opportunity. It will create equal relations among the sexes. Women will not be seen anymore as vessels to make babies. But it's complicated than that, and we have to be really careful how we talk about that. Mm-hmm. So, because again, it's the question of then who owns those kind of mechanical simulation or mechanical incubators. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is going to happen very soon. I must admit, Cristin, that for me, I think it's such a complex system. I don't think it will happen soon. I think it's much easier to pay people, pay women in desperate situation to be the womb for those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So this is my take on it. And just going for your question, one of the things that the reason for classifying the placenta is as a waste is that, there will be no regulation around it. Although placenta is an organ, it's a beautiful organ. It's the organ that, 9-month growth with happy end, as they say. Mm.